Welcome to Let's Talk Near Death, the podcast show where we talk about life, death, and experiences somewhere in between. My name is Kirsty Salisbury, the host of the show, and I welcome you to join me as I talk to everyday people with not so everyday experiences. You may also wish to join the conversation on the Let's Talk Near Death Facebook page or access additional VIP content as a premium subscriber via Patreon. For just a couple of dollars a month, you can get an early access to episodes, additional bonus content, and your chance to connect with my guests. To do so, simply visit patreon.com/Kirsty Salisbury. Let's talk near death.
I was reaching the end of my ability to hold my breath. And eventually the euphoria starts to take over and you're breathing salt water, and I drowned. And that's when I started to see a light, and the light felt like I was moving toward it, or it was coming toward me. I really don't understand that, but it felt like there was a movement toward this light.
Welcome back to the Let's Talk Near Death podcast. Today I'm joined again by David Bennett, who is a 3-time near-death experiencer. If you haven't heard our previous conversation, you want to pop over to part 1 of this conversation, because there was just so many amazing things that David was sharing with me, and I was so enjoying the conversation, but I was aware that we could talk for quite some time. So what we've done is we've broken it down into multiple episodes of this one conversation. And it is great to have David here with me again, carrying on the last part of the conversation where he was sharing his first near-death experience, a time when he drowned, and just what he went through, what that led him on to in terms of his spiritual gifts and abilities, and the way that he processed how to live life today, I suppose. So David Bennett, thank you so much for joining me on another part of this episode. Are you happy to share your second near-death experience with us?
Yes. Kirsty, thank you again for inviting me back to share more. I'm always comfortable sharing my experience. I'm very comfortable in my experience now that to share it is just, it feels natural now. And so, yeah, I enjoy talking about my experience and how it helped me. And hopefully that, if I say something, maybe it can help someone else who might be going through a similar phase in their integration.
Absolutely. I get so many emails and messages, things from people saying just by listening to the episodes, how it's helping them process their fear of death or understand that there's more than this life, or even how they can connect better with their family members who have had an experience. So I'm a strong believer that just us chatting here today is helping people. And yes, I appreciate your input too. Thank you.
Yeah, it's interesting. I hate to go off on this little tangent, but Spirit's kind of talking to me. We don't perceive a lot of the things that we do in life. We just can't perceive how it is affecting our world around us. You know what I mean? In the life review, that was so present because everything I did had a reaction, or an action and a reaction type of thing, and when you're able to perceive it from everyone that you've ever interacted with, from their perception, and get to feel their emotions and get to feel all of that, you begin how much we really do affect our circles. I like to think of it. I was a part of my childhood. I was raised in Arizona with a lot of Hopi and Navajo kids, and so the grandmother showed me about hoops, about how we have our own hoop. Our life is a hoop, and then our family is a bigger hoop that surrounds us, and then beyond that is our community. And beyond that is, of course, our state and country and our world. They're all different levels of hoops that we are the center of our hoop, and we are the center of our circle and our circles. And so what we do affects the greater circles, and this is a way of living life. And when you become aware of that, it really, I'm sorry, I took us on a real tangent, but
it's okay.
But you said something, then Spirit was like, oh yeah,
Well, that's it. We never know who might be listening and needing this message. And I love this message because we are so interconnected and everything we do impacts something or someone. And it's the ripple effect. It keeps going. It doesn't just stop there where we think it does.
No, it doesn't. Yeah. It doesn't.
So how does that connect to your second near-death experience?
Well, the second near-death experience, after my first one, I had, in 11 years, I had adopted kind of a mantra. I didn't even know what a mantra was back then, but a lot of the first experience kind of scared me, and I didn't know how to deal with it. I didn't have anybody to talk to process it. So I tried to tuck it away and not, and just try to get on with my life, but it doesn't allow you to do that. So what I did was I took 3 things from my experience that I felt I could deal with. The first one was acceptance. And I could accept this is who I am. And because in your mid-20s, having this experience, I didn't know who I was. But then suddenly you have this life review, and suddenly I could accept, okay, this is who I am. I have a lot of work to do on myself because, when you come back, you're not miraculously a different person. You have to evolve. You have to change. And I realized because I was a brash young man, I had to make some changes in my life. And so I could accept this is who I am right here, right now, and move forward. The second thing was tolerance. Before, I really didn't have any tolerance for people that weren't in my sphere of thought. And so after the life review and after being in that presence of unconditional love, I was suddenly able to be tolerant of other people's paths, because I realized it may not be, I may not agree with their path, but it's their path. It's not mine. And so that allowed me, there was a lot of growth in that for me, because suddenly I recognized that, everyone has their stuff and I have my stuff. And I don't need to buy their stuff when I'm working with someone, So it allowed me to be tolerant of people and life situations, because tolerance expands beyond just interaction with individuals into your life situations. Sometimes we're in situations we don't really care to be in, but with a little bit of work, we can move beyond those situations, So tolerance allowed me to, with acceptance of myself, tolerance of others and situations. And then the last one was truth. This was a little harder for my engineering brain to wrap its mind around, because truth to me before was factual truth. And suddenly I had this new perception of truth where there's a truth that resonates within our hearts. It's not necessarily, it doesn't always go along factual lines, but it's a truth that's a part of our higher being, our higher consciousness that helps to guide us. And so acceptance, tolerance, and truth became my credo. And that kind of got me through those 11 years. And to the point where I was starting to think, and then I started to hear some things about near-death experiences. I heard about this guy who had a near-death experience when a truck fell on him and things. And he ended up becoming my mentor after my second experience. But so I'd heard about near-death experiences. I still didn't relate them to what my experience was, to tell you the truth. I don't know why, but I just didn't make that connection. And but I thought, I got this thing, under control, I got this thing licked, and that's when you got to watch it, because that's when, I got the second, I had the second experience. And the second experience, my body was not threatened. It was not near death. This is more of a near death like experience. If you had to categorize it by the way that the researchers categorize things, but it was just as intense. So on the Grayson scale, it still scores very high as a very deep, spiritually transformative experience. But what it was at the the end of this self-imposed quarantine of my spiritual self, which seems appropriate. We're in these quarantines.
I was just thinking that too.
But anyway, toward the end of that period, I had fallen in with this group, the spiritual group, and they were going to Sedona, and that's the neighborhood where I grew up in Arizona. So I thought, and at the time I was living in central New York, and so they were going to go back there, and I thought, well, I'll hang out with this group. And my first wife was really involved with this group. And so I thought, well, this will be fun. We'll go there. While they're doing their thing, I'll go off and hike some of the trails from my childhood, and I'll do all these things. I had all these grand plans of what I was going to do when we got there. We got there, and they wanted to go to Bell Rock in Sedona, which is it's an energy vortex area it's very spiritual. And we went there, and they asked everyone to find a place and to meditate. And I was like, oh, I know this great little place where the rock kind of curves in, and I can sit in there, and I can look out over the valley, and it's a great place to meditate. Because when I lived there as a youth, the grandmothers had taught me how to meditate when I was 14, but it was more of a Native American approach to meditation. It was a going inward, but it was still it's going into stillness, kind of like just different terms. And so in this, I started to go in. And the minute I started to find that peace, I heard the light. The light that I heard in my first experience, I heard it speak to me, and it said, return to the light. And when that happened, I found myself, boom, back in the void, heading into the light, meeting my soul family, the entire first experience over again. Only this time I didn't have to get wet. But I started going through the entire experience. But when I came into the life review, that's when I got to experience the original life review. But now I had lived 11 years, and I got to experience those 11 years. And what I thought was a little thing, by taking, acceptance, tolerance, and truth, by just adopting that. And I didn't think I had really changed that much. I got to see how, oh my gosh, my life had changed dramatically, and I wasn't even aware of it. Just adopting that little mantra and working with it for the 11 years, and it totally had changed who I was. And so when I came back and came out of this re-experiencing of my life review and the near-death experience, it was and suddenly I could hear spirit. Spirit was communicating with me. And I thought, oh boy, I've really gone over the edge this time, and again, I felt like I was half here and half there for 3 days. So here I'm in this retreat with these amazing spiritual people, and I couldn't, every time I'd look at them, I'd just start to cry because I could see their essence. I could see their spirit. Spirit was communicating with me, and I was feeling all this love and all this compassion for my fellow retreat participants. And but the interesting thing, though, was this one gentleman, Richard, who was best friends with an experiencer that was really well known in the community. He'd been on television shows and a bunch of stuff like that. His name was Tom Sawyer, and he was in the early part of IANDS with the original founders. He was one of their research subjects way back when, 40 years ago. So Tom was this guy Richard was best friends with Tom, and so I come out of this meditation, or this, reliving of this near-death experience. And now you would have thought I had just drowned, because I'm drenched in perspiration. I'm wobbly, I'm weak in the knees, and I'm trying to walk down this little like mountainside. And Richard looks up and he sees me, and he sees the distress, and he comes over and he goes, Dave, and all of a sudden, blah, blah, blah. I just spill the beans, you know, and I just share, and he's listening there, and he's nodding, and he's not, you know, he's not running away, you know, and he's not criticizing. He's just listening. And when I get done, he goes, oh, you had a near-death experience. And it was like somebody opened the doors. It was amazing for me that there was somebody that was accepting to listen and just take it in and not judge, not try to interpret, nothing like that. He just said, oh, you had a near-death experience. He put a name to it, you know? And so, you know, he really connected me with Tom and another experiencer that came along, Margaret Keene, who the two of them really, really helped me to work through. I really believe that by my self-imposed isolation, that I had retarded my integration of the experience. I saw in the life review how much it had changed me, but after that second experience, I really feel that that's when the integration, because that's when I started to become, you know, growing from the experience, not hiding from it, you know, not hiding from it, not covering up for it, and stuff like that. And then I realized I wasn't living within my own truth, because I wasn't being totally honest as to myself, who I was. So if I'm not honest with myself, how could I be honest with anybody else or with any interactions that I'm doing in my life?
Now, I know you're probably really enjoying this episode, but I wanted to pop in and let you know how you can further support the Let's Talk Near Death podcast. Every little bit of input helps me, it encourages me, and it enables me to be able to bring in more guests, share more episodes, and release more content. If you're financially able, you can pop over and become a VIP subscriber for just a couple of dollars a month. If not, you may want to consider leaving a review on iTunes, sharing an episode with a friend, or connecting over with the Let's Talk Near Death Facebook page. Every little bit of input helps me. Thank you for listening, thank you for your support, and I hope you enjoy the rest of this episode.
Interesting. And so what was it that made the integration easier after the second experience? Was that through what you'd experienced in life review, or?
Yeah, well, I think realizing that I have to now start living by everything that the near-death experience had taught me, and also suddenly having some people to talk to about it, and to, you know, and to be able to relate it. And then I started writing it down. I journaled. I started writing and my experience and how it affected me and all the little steps that went along the way. And I started to call it, because I still wasn't quite ready to be out in the public with it, like I am right now, like we're talking right now. I wasn't that far along, but I felt like if I started living by what I'd learned in this near-death experience, then by example, I would be sharing my life with everyone because of what I'd seen in the life review and everything. So I called it my quiet ministry. Yeah. And I actually became ordained. That weekend, I became ordained. I wasn't going to do it, but I became ordained. And so I said, well, this is my ministry. It's to live by what I'd learned in this near-death experience. And eventually I became a spiritual counselor and things like that. And that eventually evolved into, into coaching certifications and things like that. But I started living by what I'd learned from this experience, and my life totally changed. But it didn't come without some challenges as well, because it totally destroyed my first marriage.
Yes, this is quite a common thing, isn't it? After experiences.
Yeah. There's in the high 70 percentile experiencers that are married at the time of their experience. Many times end up in divorce. I think that can change nowadays because there is so much information out in the public about these experiences that I believe that families can come to an understanding of what the experiencer is going through. But I would love to see more talk about how the dynamics between family and relationships, how this can put strains on, so that the family understands that, experiencers come back and a lot of times they don't have a materialistic drive anymore. Well, that can hurt a relationship, and they just, and suddenly they have this love for everything. And, I love this table as much as I love my wife. And, that can cause some trouble in a relationship.
How do you explain that? Yeah.
But if you can bring this knowledge into the family sphere, then they can get to understand that, this is really normal, what he's going through. He'll come to a homeostasis, an equilibrium of some sort at some point, but you have to, allow the process to grow. Right after these experiences, like I said, man, the love is everywhere, and you are just, and that's why I couldn't talk to the people I was on this retreat with, because I was just so full of love. I was like this puddle of love mush that just
love mush.
I couldn't go on my hikes. I just sat in my room and stared out over the canyon. It was just for 3 days, until I could, regain more of my physical presence.
That's amazing. And so you talked about, in our first conversation, you talked about your life review, how you had your life review up to where you were, but then you'd gone slightly into the future as well. And so that was a different connection to the life review, a little bit disjointed.
Yeah.
Did you then you had 11 years, I'm just trying to get my head around this as I'm talking. You had 11 years before the next experience, where you had another life review and you saw how much you'd grown and how far you'd come.
Yes.
Did you then see any more future stuff? Or did you remember the previous life review?
Yes. You
can tell my brain's on overdrive here.
Yeah. Well, and it's kind of interesting because, in the first one, I think I mentioned how I was kind of in gaga awe of this whole thing,
Exactly.
So when I had the second one, I was a little more aware, and so I was paying a lot more attention in the second one, and I was, especially when we crossed that threshold into future life, I started paying a little more attention as to the path and the purpose and things like that, because I knew I was going to come back. I just knew I was going to come back.
Yeah.
And I saw that I was going to have cancer. That was part of the, in the second review, I actually knew that when I came back. Okay. I knew I was going to have it. I didn't know the severity. I like to say, I'm waiting for some software developer to develop an app that can transition that timelessness in the light into a timeline here. So, and I will be the first one to buy that app, I'm telling you, because the problem I had with the future part of the review was that I thought that cancer was going to come much later in life. I thought it was going to be, the end, the later stages of my life. I knew I was going to have cancer. I knew I was going to survive the cancer, but I didn't know how severe it was going to be. I didn't know a lot of the details, just the general feeling of going through this stage of suffering and then coming out the other end and having gone through that there was a lot of purpose attached to that episode. And so that once I came out the other side, I would have another venue of helping people, of being of service, that sort of thing. So I knew that. So when I was diagnosed with the cancer, I was quite shocked at how severe the cancer was, because it was stage 4 lung cancer that had pretty much taken over my whole right lung and had metastasized into my spine. It ate away 2.5 bones of my thoracic, my spine could no longer support the weight the tumor could no longer support the weight of my spine, and my spine collapsed. And so it was in my bones. It was stage 4, and it was moving rapidly through my body. And the prognosis was that I had about 8 weeks, and that I should get my affairs in order.
Yeah. Were you afraid?
No, I was ecstatic.
Yeah. Ecstatic.
when the doctor came in, I was, you know what deja vu is, right?
Yeah.
It's like a pre-living. Well, I'm in the gurney, and the doctor comes in. In fact, the nurse that was taking care of me in the emergency room when this happened, when my spine collapsed, she was one of my secretaries while she was going to nursing school. She was one of my secretaries in the dialysis center. So, so she comes in, and she's just like, because we had a working relationship. We knew each other very well. I knew her family, and the dog's name and everything. And so she comes in, and there's just tears, because she's already received the prognosis. And then the doctor comes in, and he's kind of hemming and hawing, and kind of shuffling around like, well, Mr. Bennett, we have some news. We because they'd run. I was in there for a whole day with all these tests, and I was in excruciating pain, and all I wanted was some pain medicine. When they came in, it was like deja vu on steroids. I recognized this was something that I had seen in my life. And I was reliving it, and it was and I was like, okay, I know what he's going to go over there. I know exactly what he's going to say. And she's going to stand over here, and the tears are going to flow like the faucets are going to turn on. And he's going to tell me, and so that's when they told me, and they couldn't even use the cancer word. They couldn't even say it back then. Oh, we found these tumors and blah, blah, blah. And so they told me, and I'm like, I was surprised at the severity of it, but they said, we're going to make you as comfortable as possible. And we'll talk to you about things. And I said, oh, I know exactly what we're going to do, and so, so I actually assembled my own care team, and we did it my way. We treated the cancer my way. And I balanced out traditional approaches with holistic approaches, and Spirit was with me, guiding me through the whole thing, except for there was one period where it was the pain was so severe that they had me on a morphine and Percocet diet. And they actually sent me home with a pint of morphine. And I was like, can you put it in a smaller, because I can't go around with a pint of morphine attached to my hip. Somebody will, knock me on the head for it or something. Can I have a smaller bottle to carry when I'm out and about, when I have to go to doctor's appointments and things? But anyway, it was just, I was, during the daytime, I was in such a drug haze, I couldn't hear Spirit. And so that became almost, I wouldn't call it a crisis, but it was a huge obstacle for me, because I had gotten so accustomed to Spirit communication on a day-to-day basis and living my life with my quiet ministry and all of that, but all of a sudden in the hospital room, they hadn't released me yet. I had this moment of clarity. And so this is kind of like a third experience that went on for a couple of days, where I suddenly had this clarity. Even though they were drugging me up like crazy, it wasn't affecting me at all. I had risen above it to a certain degree. And in that moment of clarity, Spirit gave me the tools I needed to be mindful, present. And in that being mindful, they showed me a way to get off of the morphine and Percocet. And to use and to manage my pain through mindfulness, where I would actually go into the pain, encapsulate it into a sphere, and set it aside, and then move forward in my day. And so to this day, I still do that. I've had 3 reconstructive surgeries, so I'm, they've stabilized my spine and all that stuff. But I just, they gave me the clarity of what I needed in order to move through this, through this phase of intense. I'm not going to tell you, it wasn't pretty, and it was very intense.
I'm sure.
And very hard to deal with. But there was a lot to learn. I recognized, and this is where people thought I was a bit crazy, because the stages of grief. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross talks about, the first one is denial, right? And then you work through the stages of grief until you come to acceptance. Well, because of my pre-knowing of this, I knew I was going to have the cancer. I didn't realize it was going to be as severe as it was, but I also knew I was going to get beyond it. I knew I had a life beyond the cancer. So, so it was, everybody was coming, and they were coming to my bedside when I was in this expanded state, and they were eulogizing me, telling me, "Oh, you had done this." And it was almost like another life review, only with people.
Yeah.
Some of the, and this is we were talking earlier about, we kind of opened up this episode with how we don't realize how much we affect other people. And so during that phase of my quiet ministry, I had touched these people in ways that I didn't even have a clue. And they were coming to my bedside, because in a hospital, there's shifts, and I was a manager within this, within this organization. And so people on all the different shifts knew me, and they were coming into my room, and they were sitting on bedside, and they would tell me, "Oh, you did this, and it changed the way I do that," And so it was like, wow, here's another life review, these people. And they'd be there, expecting, because everybody knew that the prognosis was incredibly dire and that I only had weeks to survive. And so they were, saying their goodbyes in person while they had a chance. And I was there telling them, "Oh, no, I'm not going anywhere." I was comforting them when they were trying to come and comfort me.
Isn't that interesting?
It was a very, very surreal period of time in there. And so it was actually a very spiritual time, where I was starting to come to understand the opportunities that I had. And so another part of the mindfulness that Spirit shared with me was this sense of gratitude, to be grateful for everything in your life, the good and the bad, as I call it the perceived bad, because there really isn't a good or bad. It's what the perceptions that we attach to things that are good or bad. They just are, And so Spirit shared with me that this is just a thing. This is just a phase that we're going through, and that it's not a battle. We're not in a war. We're not fighting anything. What we're doing is we're going to overcome this obstacle. And so let's be grateful for the opportunities that we have to learn while going through this suffering. Because when do we reach out for our spiritual center the most? It's when we're in our deepest, darkest modes. That's when we reach up. That's when we're asking God for help. And so look at this opportunity. You are in probably the toughest part of your life, going through the most intense suffering. Let me tell you, a broken spine is intense. And so I got to go through that. And every day I would start with that mindfulness of setting my pain aside so I didn't have to take as much medication, to the point I actually got off the medication. And I was living with no pain medication with a broken spine. But I started my mindfulness practice by giving thanks for the opportunity to experience this, to experience everything, all the people that were helping me. And I had all these amazing insights of one simple one that just totally blew my doors open was, a lot of times when we're in this situation, we really kind of close ourselves off, and we're not allowing our friends and our family to help us, because that enriches them. We're not being honest with them if we don't allow them to come and help us and things like that. And so I was like, wow, that's huge. Thank you, Spirit. I'm going to allow my friends to be a part of this journey, and things like that. So yeah, it was a huge experience and a lot of growth. And it introduced this overwhelming sense of being grateful all the time and using that in my mindfulness practice and building on it. And so, when I was finally released and allowed to go home, the medication would wear off in the middle of the night, and it was always 3:33 at night. And a lot of people really, they have a lot of association with that. I've read up there's a whole lot of theories as to why that is it's a time when spirit communication is at its best. And so that's when I would commune with spirit, and I would start these reflections, and I would go into we actually had a meditation room, and this is now I'm with my current wife, and we would have, and I would get up and I would go in and I would have this time, and I would speak the spirit communication into one of those little micro recorders, and then I would finally get tired enough that I could go back and go to sleep. And you got to realize, living with a broken spine, it's not an easy time. But it got, that really, there was so many insights that started coming, and that was a practice that I developed. And then I realized that it wasn't a normal type of meditation. And I started studying, and it turns out that a lot of the early mystics used to do what was called contemplation meditation. And so that's what I felt, okay, well, I'm exploring contemplative meditation. And then what you do in contemplative meditation, you still go into the stillness and quiet your mind, but then you pose a question to the universe, and you allow the answers to unfold, and you allow that dialogue to develop. And so I started that practice in 2000 of going into contemplation every morning. And the doorway was gratitude. The doorway into that contemplative space was gratitude. Because when you're grateful, it opens us up. When we are grateful, we release all of our attachments when we're in gratitude. I mean, pure gratitude, where we are grateful for everything. We release all of our attachments, and that opens that expansive consciousness so that we can really, really have an honest dialogue with ourselves, with the universe, with God, Goddess, all it is, Great Pumpkin, whatever you want to call it.
It's amazing. I've got a couple more questions for you. Throughout these experiences, and did you have an out-of-body experience with the cancer as well?
Yeah, I had a number of them. That, like I said, there was this moment of clarity. I had a moment. The meditation I was given this meditation to help me. It was a kind of an internal meditation and some visualizations that I was given during treatment, where I would pop out of my body and I would visualize, a feather wearing away my cancer cells and things like that, and this other one. And there was this time when I was kind of out of body, and one of the nuns, because the hospital I worked in was a Catholic institution, and one of the nuns came in to talk to me, and I didn't know this nun. It was someone, because I knew a few of them that worked with our programs and stuff like that, but I didn't know this one. And she came in and she sat by my bedside, and she gave me this beautiful meditation to help me to overcome some of the worst parts of the pain. And and then she left. She just turned around and left. And then when the nurses came in, I said, "Who was that? Who was the nun that was just in here?" And they had moved my room to just outside the nurses' station because I was getting so many visitors that they felt it was intrusive. So they wanted to control how many people were coming in to see me. And so they had moved me right beside the nurses' station so that they could keep an eye on who was coming and going. They said, there isn't a nun on the floor today. I don't know who you're talking about. And it was one of those angelic moments, where she came and gave me what I needed at that moment, type of thing. So there were a lot of little out of body type of experiences that were occurring during that phase.
Yeah, exactly. I love it. I love that you're talking about the meditation, the contemplation, and about being very disconnected to what's happening physically. When you met your wife, this is a very unspiritual question. You met your current wife. When you first got together with her, did you tell her that you were going to get cancer?
No, I didn't. Oh, you know what? Actually, we didn't. We got together. We were dating. We had this long distance relationship for the longest time. But we hadn't gotten married. But she had come up and she was like spending time. We were kind of cohabitating on and off. She would go back to where she was living and she'd come up and stay with me for a long time. And so when my spine collapsed and the diagnosis came, she was there when that happened, and we weren't married yet. And so, now if you ask her, I swear I told her I'm going to get past this, but she swears I never told her that. And so she was, I knew I was going to get beyond it. I like I said with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, everybody thought I was in denial because I was already in acceptance that, okay, this is fine. This is the path I got to do, and I'm going to get past it. Well, I'm telling everybody this, and so I'm positive I told her, but maybe not. But anyway, so she was so distraught, but she was like, well, I met this guy who's so heart-centered and we were going to make a life together, and suddenly now he's dying on me, and and she was really mad at God, and she had an angelic experience that happened to her as a result of that, where she was driving down the roads yelling at God and finally said, are you even out there? And then here in the States we have these guaranteed overnight delivery trucks, and so a dual semi GOD truck went by, and she's right after she swore, are you even listening, and all of a sudden God went by, and so she was like, okay.
That's hilarious.
But but we had because we'd had a long distance relationship for a while, we had really deep spiritual connection. In fact, one of the few times that we first connected, we were with the same spiritual group that went to Sedona for my first experience. We were with that group in upstate New York, and the leader of the group was going through a meditation, a Merkaba meditation, where you develop your light vehicle and then you kind of project yourself out into space. And we were in the same room, laying very close to each other. And when I was in my light vehicle, I could see Cindy over there, and I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool. And I kind of moved my my Merkaba and my light vehicle over to her, and I kind of gave her a little bump, and she looked at me and she gave me a bump back, and so we kind of, through this meditation, we're having this like bumper cars going through the universe,
I love it.
And then we come, and then the leader brings us out of the meditation. We totally lost track of whatever the heck he wanted us to do, and so he brings us out of the meditation, and we just look at each other, and we both had the same experience. We were actually, out there having that experience together.
Oh, that is so fun. That is so great. I love that. It's beautiful. So we've talked for quite some time. We've talked about a lot of different aspects of your life and your experiences. For our listeners, is there one particular thing that stands out over everything you've experienced in your life to date? One particular thing or message or something you wish to communicate?
Yeah, I think a lot of times, especially in times that are traumatic, and the world goes through phases of a lot of stress and trauma. And it's going through a phase like that right now. But one of the things that that's very near and dear to my heart is the fact that we don't have to go looking for spirit. We don't have to go looking for God, because God is within us, and it's always with us. And God loves us so much that we can't even perceive. And I learned that in my first experience, that I am loved, and that and it's a totally unconditional love, and it's there to support us. It's there to nurture us. It's there to bring us into a more whole or holistic way of living. And if we can trust it and rely on it, it'll be there for us no matter what.
Absolutely. We don't have to go searching for spirit. David Bennett, thank you so much. Oh, I could talk for hours. Thank you. You've shared so much with us. You're the first time I've done a double episode, so thank you very much. And if you're listening and you're thinking, I didn't hear the first part of the conversation, I would really strongly suggest to go back and catch the first episode where I'm talking to David. But David, thank you for your time and your generosity. And you've opened my eyes in so many different areas. And I just love that last piece that you've left with us, that we don't have to chase and find spirit, that spirit's within us, and that we all have this connection. So we wish you the best going forward. I don't know whether you've seen more things for your life or whether you know what's on the cards, but either way, we really value your time and wish you all the best. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Kirsten. It's been such an honor. I really appreciate what you're doing and all the people that you're reaching out and helping. I think it's a needed service in this world today. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And that's another episode of the Let's Talk Near Death podcast. Thanks for tuning in. If you've enjoyed this, please feel free to share it with your friends. And don't forget that you can leave me a review over on iTunes or grab a VIP pass over at patreon.com/Kirsty Salisbury. My heart is to get these messages out there, to change the conversation around death, and your support can help me do more of what I need to do.